But I want to thank Andreas for his help that we have been able to maintain our monthly UN breakfasts with an added benefit in that since it's all on YouTube, we've been able to reach out to a number of fellow Rotarians around the world. So I know that I get feedback from people in Ireland and in London and Germany and in the Far East in Asia who are able to watch the clips from whatever presentation we make this morning. We're very pleased this morning and honored to have you as our guests and actually have Dr. Jeffrey Sachs with us. And the person who's actually going to introduce him is a former student of his, who is chair of our membership committee and has put together our youth empowerment series, which has done so very, very well. And that's Valor Tumurchador. So she's with us. Good morning, Valor. And hopefully Dr. Sachs will be with us shortly. I think a number of years ago, I got involved with Dr. Barry Commoner, the late Dr. Barry Commoner. Some of you may know his name. And got involved as in environmental issues around the United States, representing different states, representing Canada, going into court, and very proud to say we never lost a case. Some over 70 projects, including major projects right here in New York City. And I think one of the problems that people face when they deal with any issues dealing with the environment is they tend to leave out or not consider economics, and that's a fatal mistake. Anytime you deal with anything that has such an impact on a culture, on a society as the environment, you have to include economics. So that's why I'm particularly pleased that we were able to have Dr. Jeffrey Sachs this morning, because he is a famous, obviously, a world-renowned economist, and we'll be able to bring that appreciation. Well, Laura, do you have anything you want to say before Dr. Sachs comes in?
I highly appreciate President Gerard. I just wanted to make one correction here. I'm not a former student of Professor Sachs. The part of the reason I joined the program within the Earth Institute on Sustainability Management was because of the Professor Jeffrey Sachs, and he's the one of the who invented this program. And then also back in 2014, I had a chance to join World Economic Forum on Southeast Asia. And then that year's theme was sustainable development. And someone who was born and grow up and raised and educated in post-communist countries whose third language is English, I had zero clue about sustainable development, and I needed to educate myself. And I took a Coursera course on Coursera by Professor Jeffrey Sachs, The Age of Sustainable Development. I highly encourage people, if you have a chance, to take that one. It was very good for me, and it was tipping point for me to move from coal mining company to join this program and do 180 degrees shift within my career. So yeah, I'm very excited, and heartbeat is like raising already. So shall we?
Bowler, let me just say something real quick. Professor Sachs is not here, but I do want to acknowledge his assistant, who was so very kind and gracious in helping us put this together. Savannah, would you like to say a word since we're waiting for your boss, so to say?
Sure. I'm very happy to be here with all of you. I know Professor Sachs is really excited to speak with you. He's just wrapping up a meeting. This happens all the time, but he'll be here as soon as he can. It's just back to back these days. But I know he's spoken with you in the past, and he's very much enjoyed it. So
great. Great. Thank you, Savannah, again, for helping putting this together. I know he had a crazy schedule, so we had to find a day that is suitable for him. Back to President Gerard, so we can...
Andres, if I may.
Or Bolo, go ahead. Sorry.
It's Elira.
Good morning, distinguished Rotarians and our honorary guests. Welcome to today's 9th International Breakfast Meeting in the 111th year of the Rotary Club of New York, so named the Host Club of America by Rotary International founder Paul Harris on April 1st, 1926. Today, we are honored and humbled to have a world-renowned economist Columbia University professor and director of Center for Sustainable Development at Columbia University and president of the United Nations Sustainable Development Solutions Network, Professor Jeffrey Sachs, as a guest speaker. I would like to appreciate our executive director, Andreas, to make this happen. And as we all know, Professor Sachs is a world's leading expert on economic development, global macroeconomics, and he has been advisor to three of United Nations General Secretaries, including Antonio Guterres, Ban Ki-moon, Kofi Annan, and he advised both Sustainable Development Goals and SDG, Millennial Development Goals. And for housekeeping, it will be 20 minutes presentation by Professor Sachs, 10 minutes Q&A, since time is limited. So please submit your questions on the chat box ahead of the time. And there will be an international service meeting followed by this meeting led by John German. Thank you so much. And stage is yours, Professor Sachs.
Thank you very much. Good to be with all of you. Thanks for inviting me. I'll speak briefly so that we can have a discussion. Thanks to all of you for your leadership and your commitment to global goals and to cooperation and to solving problems. Well, the good news for all of us, we have so many problems to solve, so lots of interesting things to do. The bad news is the problems are overwhelming and they're coming faster than we can solve them. So I was just on a call this past hour with a wonderful group of global vaccine experts, vaccinologists, microbiologists, public health specialists about the challenge of scaling up vaccine coverage to all parts of the world. And it's indicative of how complicated our problems are everywhere. We need to reach, say, 60% of the world's adult population with vaccines to bring COVID-19 to an end. But think how hard that is. If in the United States, where we actually make the vaccines, don't have any budget constraints, have all the resources, how hard it is. Think of what it's like for most of the other 192 countries that don't make any vaccines at all, don't have any spare cash, don't have any clue as to when any vaccines are going to arrive. And then we were reviewing all of the international processes about this, which are completely overwhelmed because we have WHO, the World Health Organization, and a very good initiative called the ACT Accelerator, which is the global mechanism under WHO to bring COVID-related tools to bear on an accelerated basis, vaccines, medicines, therapeutics, PPE, and so forth, diagnostics. But they're overwhelmed. They don't have a budget. They don't have enough staff. There are so many uncertainties. And so this is the reason we were just brainstorming on this for the last hour is how do we make international systems work effectively to actually solve the problems that we have before our eyes. Add to this how many complications there are from ignorance, fear, rumor mongering, and so on. We have a huge opposition to the immunizations, even in the United States, much less places with far less capacity and presumably less information. And so the campaign against doing good is also pervasive right now. We also have a tendency, which I greatly bemoan, to make all problems into geopolitical problems. The United States government announced this past that it's going to work with the so-called Quad countries, India, Japan, Korea, and Australia, to distribute vaccines in Asia to counter the influence of China. This is ridiculous, frankly. Why aren't we cooperating with China to actually cover vaccines in Asia? Why does it have to be viewed as us versus them? Why suddenly are vaccines thrust into political conflict as opposed to a cooperative, logical approach where we say to our Chinese counterparts, congratulations, you've developed several vaccines, so have we. Let's put them into operation together. For the life of me, I can't understand our thinking about this. But this is also a kind of obstacle. Well, friends, if that's the vaccine issue, multiply it about 50 times to think about all of the challenges that we face in achieving sustainable development and the goals that we have set ourselves. Every one of them, whether it's COVID-19 or getting kids in school or fighting climate change, is complicated. And it's complicated in similar ways. First, it's often highly technical. And so there's not good understanding. It requires lots of planning, but planning doesn't exist. It requires public sector budgets, but those don't exist. It requires global cooperation, but that is scarce and difficult to mobilize. It requires long-term thinking by politicians with short-term time horizons. It requires public understanding in a public that gets fake news. So I find these challenges quite daunting and a big puzzle for us about how to be effective in this. One of Rotary's great successes over the years is you just do things. So you don't wait around for everyone to solve the problems. You go out and you do things. You build things, you deliver commodities, you help communities. So I think it's a great success. You don't ask for permission from global unanimous cooperation. You just go do good. And that is definitely part of the answer. Another part of the answer, to my mind, is to somehow continue to our communities, our colleagues, our politicians that cooperation is a good thing, not weakness. And that the more international tension there is, the harder it is to solve any problem. And that I keep thinking also, there's so much rudeness in diplomacy right now, coming from the US, by the way. Every day we insult China, for example. I don't believe in it. If diplomats would be one thing, they should be polite. It's the art of diplomacy that at least you're talking to other people without insulting them. And if you're giving insults, you're not a diplomat in my book. The idea is to try to find common ground, not to accentuate the differences. So I think, another part of our challenge is trying to help people to understand that vilifying others is not actually going to solve our own problems, make our lives better, give us some advantage. It's just going to make life harder for everybody. Every day I read, attacks on foreigners by congressmen in the United States that I'm sure have never been to the countries they're attacking, have no idea. I would love a checklist for every congressman. What do you know? Because what you're saying is nonsense. And these are often very high level officials, but they appeal to their local constituents, or they're worried about their primary opponents or whatever, but they're not telling the truth. So I think that this is another big challenge for us. There is some good news, absolutely some good news. The United States dodged a bullet, literally. We didn't dodge all of them, but we dodged a big bullet that came from Trump, who, in my view, was the most dangerous president we've had in the US history, with the possible exception of James Buchanan, whose machinations led to the Civil War. But other than that, Trump was the most dangerous, nasty, real psychopathic leader that we've had in our country. And I think he's gone for the time being, at least, but he better be gone for the long term. That's good news. President Biden is a very decent man. From my experience with him over 30 years, I like him a lot. I think he wants good outcomes and for the right reasons, and that's a huge plus. And there is increasing recognition of some of the big challenges that we face. Obviously COVID, but also climate change. And there's actual movement, not only in the United States, but globally, to find, for the first time, deep solutions to the challenge of climate change and environmental destruction. So I'm seeing more rhetoric in the right direction, more commitments by national leaders in the right direction, even though governments then have a hard time following through on what they've committed to and achieving technical results. But still, we are moving in the right direction. And most governments are now coming to understand that we really need to decarbonize the energy system by mid-century to remain safe. We need to stop the destruction of rainforests and habitats to remain safe. And so I'm seeing progress in these areas. So all in all, we're in a very shaky period. We really do have to get this pandemic done, and that is going to require at least till the end of 2022. We need systematic planning. We need global cooperation. We need international financing to accomplish that. So this is the short-term order. Then we need much more clarity and cooperation of where we're going from here. And it can't be America first or any single country first. It has to be on a cooperative basis. We have to strengthen the UN system. We have to strengthen multilateralism. We have to rededicate ourselves, especially, by the way, in 2023, on the 75th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, to the concept of human dignity for everybody and human rights for everybody as a basis for global cooperation. So this, I think, is our big challenge. Let me stop my brief comments here because we have plenty to talk about. You're all very deeply involved in these issues, and I'd love to hear your perspectives and ways that we could work together on some of these topics. Thank you for letting me jump into your meeting today.
Thank you so much, Professor Sachs. That's a fantastic overview. And while we are, please submit your questions on the chat bot since we have a limited time, or raise your hands if you have questions. While we are waiting for the next question, I have a question to you, Professor Sachs. So since you are being part of both Millennium Development Goals and Sustainable Development Goals, and how do you see where we were before when we switched from MDGs to SDGs, and where we are now, and where we are heading, and as also like NGOs, as a Rotary Club of New York, Rotary International. What can we do to meet the—
Great, thanks a lot. So I've been with these goals now for 21 years because Kofi Annan asked me to advise him back at the beginning of the Millennium Development Goals, and I've been part of this journey since the start. I really like these global goals. I like having them. I like having a language where we can say that we have shared aspirations. I think that the content of the goals, both the MDGs, the 8 of them, and the 17 SDGs are smart, humane, decent, and achievable. So first of all, I like these goals, and they're really worth working for and fighting for. They make a difference also because governments around the world and civil society and businesses come to learn about the goals and then come to align with the goals, not perfectly, not instantaneously, not at the scale and intensity we would like, but not bad actually, because this is a big noisy world. And to get a whole world oriented around a common set of 17 objectives is quite unusual actually in human history, almost unprecedented. So in this sense, I think that this process works to further the idea of a common humanity addressing worthy objectives, and in some cases, really life-saving objectives, both at individual level and at the global humanity scale. But in terms of the capacity of the international community to implement these goals, it's rather weak. And it was very hard hit, actually twice. You know, at the beginning of the Millennium Development Goals, we had September 11. And September 11 completely redirected the American attention span in the public and in the government to war. And so the MDGs got started at the beginning of what turned out to be 15 years of perpetual war in the Middle East. It was terrible, a terrible mistake by the US. America doesn't really learn, by the way, from its mistakes very much because we're not great at history, so we don't review what happened. We just go on. But it was a lot of lost opportunity. The whole world was not caught up in that, and some countries made great progress in the MDGs, and China had spectacular success during this period, and the MDGs played a role in China's success. I know that. It's interesting. It's, you know, even at the highest levels of government. And so when the scorekeeping came at the end of the MDGs, global poverty really had been cut in half. And that was, and a lot of other progress had been made. When the SDGs came in, we were similarly derailed. We were derailed by Donald Trump's election because Trump was the worst of America. And America has a bad part to it. America is really two different countries. One, the country I know and love and am grateful for. It's the country of immigrants. It's the country of a fresh start. It's the country of multiculturalism. And there's another side to America, which is the history of racism, slavery, oppression, white supremacy. And Trump represented that. And I don't mince words because I think we need clear understanding of these facts. So America is two countries to my mind, one quite beautiful and the other quite ugly. And they battled with each other for hundreds of years, actually. And there's a lot of ugliness in this country and some quite wonderful side to it. I personally love New York because New York is the ultimate microcosm of the whole world. Everybody's here. everybody, 200 languages, hundreds of ethnic groups, the best food in the world, culture everywhere. That's the bright side of America. But we have this other side. And Trump really, came to power on the worst impulses of not half of America, but maybe 40% or 30%. He never said the words sustainable development goals in 4 years of the administration. The government had nothing to do with them. I would say literally he never said sustainable development goals. I can't completely verify it because I've not gone through every presidential speech or note, but I doubt it and never heard it. I heard George Bush say them, but I never heard Donald Trump say them. So this was a big setback. And the US has started to go a little crazy on anti-China rhetoric also. This is also part of America's bad tradition, that it always wants an enemy. This is another dangerous part of what's happening right now in the US, which is, okay, our next enemy is China. So every word is an insult. And I'm quite worried about that. But at the global level, the SDGs have kind of taken hold. As I say, I used to travel every day and visit dozens of countries a year, and they were working hard on the SDGs in many, many countries. But what we did not have was adequate financing, plans, strategies. Then came COVID. And COVID obviously is by itself a huge disruption, a tragedy, a huge cost, and a huge diversion from the long term, because now we're battling for survival day to day. We're not fighting for the long-term objectives. So to get back to the SDGs, we need to end this pandemic. And it's going to take at least another year and a half at the very earliest to do that. And so that is our immediate challenge. Then we have to learn some lessons, which, and the lessons have to be, we need to strengthen global cooperation, and we need to strengthen global investment for the long term and for the good. And that's going to be a battle over the next 2 or 3 years. Can we make the international system work better? On the whole, I'm optimistic because I believe that the different parts of the world, the leadership wants to find solutions. I'm a little pessimistic about the US-China relations. It's very important, the two countries' relations, and we're in just a nasty Twitter match right now of mutual recrimination, mostly coming from the US side, unfortunately. And we need to get over that. But if we do, the US, European Union, China, Japan, Korea, African Union, we could build a real alliance of regions to work together to solve big problems. And I'm hoping we can get to that. And I think the next couple of years are quite important in that. Something like turning point years, because when you have a deep crisis like this, it really shakes the system. And either we're going to come out in a failure of international institutions, or we're going to come out with much strengthened institutions. And that's what I hope we really work on.
Fantastic, Professor Sachs. Thank you so much. As you mentioned in your earlier one of the interview, You mentioned that it's a silver point, it's a wake-up call for us as well as, and we can also see that a lot of corporations start focusing on their ESGs and corporate social responsibility from societal perspective and also from environmental perspective. Hopefully it's not greenwashing, and it would be like, it shows more like real work right now, which is incredible. And here's a question from our President, Honorary Judge Gerard Sherfin. How do we address the position of the underdeveloped nations who argue that the developed nations have enjoyed the benefits of carbon-based fuels and now want to impose standards that may not allow the underdeveloped nations to catch up?
I think what we need everywhere just for planetary survival is a massive buildup of renewable energy and a massive buildup of digital access, because the digital access is the key to ensure services in the future. If you are online, you can reach a doctor, you can gain training, your child can be in school, either blended or online. Government can reach you and find you. You, in principle, can reach the government and find it, and so on. So I think that the key investments for the future, to my mind, are making sure that we form our energy system for climate safety, that we have digital access for all, and of course that we are educating and training our children and educating our children for the future. And the most important thing we can do to help all countries in that task is actually financing. We need to ensure that small companies, startups, governments have the means to undertake this kind of large-scale financing. In about an hour, I'll be speaking with the African Development Bank leaders about Africa's scale-up of renewable energy. Africa has, of course, it's got the best sunshine in the world. It's got absolute ability to power the whole continent on sunshine, but it costs money. Our estimates are about $100 billion a year will be needed for Africa to basically scale up its renewable energy system. Where to find that funding, how to mobilize it, both private, philanthropic, and official financing, is a very practical possibility. It's actually not so much money in terms of even the size of Africa's economy. So I'm suggesting large-scale lending facilities through institutions like the Islamic Development Bank and the African Development Bank and others to help do this, and then lots and lots and lots of projects on the ground, because we should be helping microgrids and mini grids for every village across Africa to be connected and to have access to renewable energy. So I think that the answer to the question, how do we help developing countries in this context, is we really double down on our support for these countries to catch up on the technologies, the infrastructure, the education of children that really makes the basis for long-term economic and sustainable development. And what I try to do from a practical point of view is to look at what are the timelines, the costs, and the institutions that can underpin that kind of scaled up effort. And so as I mentioned today, I'll be speaking with the African Development Bank because I see that bank as being a central part of the story. The United States should come in and help provide that bank with enough aid in capital that the bank can go out and finance a huge amount of new renewable energy and digital connectivity. And then we should all be working all over the villages and the cities to ensure that people are able to avail themselves of those new services and opportunities. This is a big adventure. One of the things I love about China's development success is that China showed that you could do this for a country of 1.4 billion people in deep poverty 40 years ago, and now completely out of poverty. And that is a real testimony to the power of investment and good planning and good outreach to completely transform a society. And Africa is about the same size population as China, and it needs to do that now.
Absolutely, and China is outshining the age of artificial intelligence nowadays. So next question.
Absolutely, which is, by the way, all the AI systems also, if we don't use them for cyber warfare, but use them for these problems, they're going to solve a lot of problems, because people who could never get an X-ray read are going to have your smartphone do your diagnostics for you, and so many other things possible now. Actually, as we all know, every day a new technological step, if we put it to good use.
Fantastic, thank you so much. The next question is from Rick Olfig. So it's about media. We are witnessing the weakening and possible fracturing of freedom and democracy in the United States and elsewhere, as large number of people are putting their trust in media that have monetary, political, ideological, religious, spiritual, or other reasons to testify information, promote hate speech, engage in sensationalism, and advocate violence. Would you like to see a major mobilization for media literacy and media transformation?
Wow, this is so hard. And I don't know that we know the answer to this, but we are so fractured in information, and worse than that, so poorly equipped in general in the public to understand complicated issues that we're really incredibly vulnerable to this infodemic that's coming in so many directions. I think the fundamental answer to this, in some sense, is education, not media per se, because we need people who can reason, think, participate in scientific understanding, understand the world around them, and be able to discern truth from falsehood. And many studies have shown that young American kids cannot tell the difference between a sales pitch and news. And we won't solve that problem by changing the sales pitch. We're going to only solve that problem by improving the capacity to think, I think. Of course, we should also put responsibility on companies and on purveyors of false news, but it's hard, and it's hard to do in an open society, that kind of action. But what we could do, I think, is improve education. And one of the things I'm engaged in that I'd love for your advice and help on is a project that we've launched called Mission 4.7, because Target 4.7 of the Sustainable Development Goals, if you look it up, says that all learners should learn sustainable development, sustainable lifestyles, cultures of peace, cultural appreciation, global citizenship. So it is saying that the content of education should be enhanced so that young people understand the world around them and understand the challenges that they face. They should learn about climate change, the science of it. They should learn about global society. They should learn about different cultures. They should learn about cultural toleration. And we don't teach those things actually right now. And teaching really matters, I will say, as a teacher over the last 41 years, and as a student before that, which is we should not be shy about the need to teach, because you don't come into this world with the knowledge you need. It has to be, you have to be helped with that. You have to be mentored. You have to be given access. You have to be trained. And it's a long process, but it's a very valuable, crucial process. And I'm pretty much convinced that American society, for example, lacks the scientific literacy right now to understand a great deal of what's happening. Our test scores, by the way, are far behind those of China, Korea, Japan, uh, Singapore, Hong Kong. I don't think it's an accident. They teach better, more rigorous, more scientific, and we're not equipping young people with the discernment that they need. And it comes back to Rick's question. We then are not able to tell the difference between pernicious nonsense and truth. And the attitudes that have been inculcated recently are, of course, to oppose expertise, fight scientists. There's been a lot of attempt to delegitimize knowledge. And I get a lot of, attack emails and so on that are so sadly unaware of facts and science that it's disheartening and it's dangerous. But this is our job, actually. We're living in a more and more complex world, and it's probably not surprising that much of that complexity is not understood. I think the answer is that we have to do better in the teaching and training.
Absolutely.
I'm constantly impressed by an obvious point, which is that we live in technological systems that we can barely understand. Our technical capacity to really understand how this Zoom is working, or how our phones work, or how our payment systems work, or how diseases are transmitted, or how the vaccines work, it's pretty limited. You have to work round the clock as a student with good guidance to understand even the fundamentals of any of these things. And most people don't have the benefit of that kind. I always claim and take pride in the fact I call myself a perpetual student, because I went into school in 1959. So that's 62 years ago. And I never got out of school. And I still don't understand, or I understand less and less perhaps, but I do think that this is absolutely key for us.
Fantastic. As a former student of your program that you initiated within the Earth Institute, and the Professor Jeffrey Sachs is a fantastic professor, and I highly encourage, if you have any chance, to take the Age of Sustainable Development on Coursera. It's 20.
That's nice.
That was the tipping point for me to move from a coal mining company to join the program and join renewable energy and tech companies.
Bravo.
And you were the tipping point, and I've been like waiting for you with the heartbeat. Thank you so much. Since we discussed about alternative energy and all those things in earlier conversation, there is kind of question from Dennis Wong, but it's more from like a weapon point. Your thoughts on advice for the world free of nuclear weapons to prevent nuclear war? and the use of trillions of dollars to address poverty and inequality. What do you suggest Rory considering doing for a world free of nuclear weapons to prevent nuclear war? And I would like to add there another question related to nuclear. So how do you see towards meeting the energy needs in 3 decades from now? The world would need to invest in nuclear energy because based on current battery storage and renewable energy innovations, we will still need other energy sources. Please, your thoughts.
Great. So 2 great questions. This will probably be the last that I can give because I have students waiting at 10 o'clock. But let me say one thing about nuclear. I spent a lot of the last several weeks reading 3 phenomenal books, which to my mind were the best history that I know of the nuclear arms race, atomic weapons development, the geopolitics around this. And they are books by Martin Sherwin, a great historian. And the most recent of these, which is a riveting book, is called Gambling with Armageddon. And it's the best history that I've ever read by far of the Cuban Missile Crisis and all of the lead up to the Cuban Missile Crisis, and including the atomic weapons development and arms race. And what Professor Sherwin demonstrates is we are not safe as long as there are nuclear weapons, period. And these weapons, which we claim are somehow security for us, are so deeply to our insecurity that we absolutely have to understand their real history and their continuing danger. So this book shows how close we came to complete disaster in the Cuban Missile Crisis, but it also shows how many bad choices were made in leading up to the Cuban Missile Crisis, and how the reliance, the American idea that nuclear weapons would give us security was so deeply embedded in foreign policy thinking and strategic thinking, and how wrong it was, and how wrong it continues to be. But it was viewed as a cheap way to have preponderant power at low cost. But it's ridiculous. The American planners constantly overestimated the US advantage, underestimated the risks, vastly overestimated the time it would take for other countries to develop the technologies. So there was one miscalculation after another that was quite awful. And 2 other books by Professor Sherwin. One is called A World Destroyed, which is a classic of history describing how the US developed the concepts of nuclear weapons diplomacy, even during World War II, as the atomic bomb was being invented. And it's an absolutely phenomenal book. And then the 3rd book is a riveting, deep, long biography of J. Robert Oppenheimer, the American scientist who led the atomic energy project, and how the right-wing foreign policy establishment turned on Professor Oppenheimer when he started to call for nuclear disarmament, and actually took away his security clearance in 1954. Well, you don't have to spend the dozens of hours that I spent on all 3 books to say that, just to summarize, that the nuclear proliferation issue is absolutely with us to this moment. The world remains dangerous and destabilized because of these weapons. The Non-Proliferation Treaty calls on the nuclear powers not only to stop proliferation, but to disarm. And the United States, of course, doesn't listen to the treaty that it itself launched and that it itself has ratified. And so we should not be talking about modernizing our nuclear fleet. We should be talking about denuclearizing. And this is also what the UN treaty to eliminate nuclear weapons is all about. And it has huge global support, except by the nuclear powers. And so this is the world telling the nuclear powers, you have endangered the whole world, including yourselves. You have a responsibility, as well as under international law, to move to denuclearization. So that brings us to the other side of nuclear energy, which is the peaceful uses of nuclear energy. It raises a huge number of questions, which at 9:52 a.m., unfortunately, I can't go into at length, except to say that the use of nuclear energy for peaceful purposes has some highly desirable aspects, which is that it is base load, zero carbon energy that supplies about 10% of global power generation right now. That's the positive side. The negative side are the risks of these facilities themselves, like at Fukushima and 3 Mile Island and Chernobyl. Also the nuclear wastes, also the nuclear proliferation that can result from ostensibly peaceful nuclear power. So they're huge issues. And I would just summarize by saying the following. There are several promising technologies to make plants safer. There is the big challenge of nuclear proliferation. And one should also keep in mind the other kind of potential peaceful nuclear power, which is fusion. And I've recently been briefed by a number of leading scientists on nuclear fusion who have informed me of important breakthroughs that make fusion for energy not a completely distant dream, but something that is worth exploring in active research and development. And of course, doesn't lead to nuclear waste the same way and doesn't lead to nuclear proliferation the same way. So fusion should not be off the table from a research and development point of view. Fission may play a role, but just as a technical matter, we can decarbonize without nuclear power because we can combine renewable energy with storage technologies. It's probably more expensive, but not impossible. So nuclear power in this sense is a choice facing all the risks that it also entails, including some of the benefits, but it is not a necessity. And this is how I view this complicated issue. But a lot of, there's a lot more to say about it. And I have colleagues like Professor Hansen, our great climatologist, who believes in nuclear energy as one part of the climate solution, absolutely necessary, because he says we need scaled zero carbon baseload energy, and we would be foolish to turn away from one whole major class of technologies.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Professor Sachs, and I really appreciate your time. And since you mentioned this will be the last question that we could take from our audience, there are so many incredible questions I would love to keep asking over and over. And thank you so much for your time. And
thanks to all of you, and thank you for all that you're doing. And let's stay together. This is really important and a very key point of our history. So I'm Sachs at columbia.edu. Don't fail to reach out to me in any way, and I would be grateful for all proposals of activities together. And thanks to all of you.
Thanks, Jeffrey.
Bye-bye.
Now I would like to hand over to our President Gerard Schwerfan to close the session. Thank you so much. President Schwerfan?
I had
you
to
mute?
unmute myself. I had to unmute myself. Thank you. Modern technology. Thank you, Balor, for your excellent job this morning. Thank you, Professor Sachs. And thank you for all of our guests who were with us this morning. I saw there were quite a few number of questions, and unfortunately, this is actually Professor Sachs stayed for almost twice as long as we expected him to, which was very, very well appreciated. I think he really pinpointed a role that Rotary can play. He mentioned, for example, the need to have more multiculturalism in our education system. And those of you who might be familiar with what goes on in New York City was one of the first school systems to spend a lot of time dealing specifically with this. Ninth grade students in particular, first year of high school, are required to take and pass a Regents exam in global studies, which is exactly what Professor Sachs was talking about. However, this is not without controversy because there are many people in the United States who are absolutely opposed to this. And again, understanding the economics of everything, book publishers like Houghton Mifflin, for example, who spend a lot of money and providing textbooks for schools, don't like to have different editions of the same book for 50 different states. So if, for example, the legislature of Texas requires that a textbook has certain information and certain information is omitted, a company like Houghton Mifflin will be prone to omit the information required by Texas just so that they can sell the book across the country. And this is one of the economic and political issues that I think Rotary can address. Not getting involved, obviously, we cannot get involved with any political party or political philosophy, but just having the conversation and encouraging a conversation on statewide levels, I think can enhance our role as Rotary clubs. Thank you everyone for participating. I was very glad to see members from France and Brazil and other places and Britain around the world. And we encourage you to participate with us all the time. All our Zooms are open to everyone. Some of you know that we have a new signature service project here in New York City, where Rotary Club of New York, now joined up with several other Rotary clubs, is going to take on the role of trying to mediate relations between the New York City Police Department and our various communities. So stay tuned. You will get information about this. The police department is eager to participate, as we have seen a number of communities are, and we're hoping to start something which will be a long-term project for Rotary here, not only in New York City, but around the country. So thank you again, everyone, for being with us this morning. Stay well, stay safe. Remember our 4-way test. See you next time. Thank you all.
And I would like to hand over to John German to lead the international service call, and feel free to stay, everyone, those who are interested in. So have a good day. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Bula.